So, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats so we can get started. It is my pleasure to now introduce the last and final panel on smart cities and communities, the backbone of climate action. And this panel is moderated by Adam Fried, who is the principal for sustainability at Bloomberg Associates. And prior to joining the Bloomberg team, Adam was the Deputy Managing Director of the Nature Conservancy Global Water Program, where he worked to help cities have safe and sustainable water supplies. Adam was also with the New York City Mayor's Office working on the long-term planning and sustainability, overseeing the implementation of New York sustainability initiatives and developing the city's first climate resilience program. And we know that the big cities are sometimes bigger than some of the smaller states, so it's an important and impressive panel we have here who deal with who are city dwellers, our immediate problems and daily lives. So we're all looking forward to hear about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for those of you who have stayed at the end of the day. I think we have the unenviable position of not only being between you and whatever your evening plans are, but also following the previous panel, which really was a lively discussion. But I think we're going to refute 2 points that have been made earlier today. In the second panel of the day, people were talking about why politicians don't make decisions and investments for the long-term future and how there seems to be a disconnect with that. And the fact that many leaders and politicians don't like investing in or doing things that are seen unsexy. And a lot of that was looking at codes and regulations and a way to really change the DNA of cities to help with energy efficiency and sustainability. We have a panel today that is actually refuting both of those, making really long-term investments in important issues and doing a lot of unsexy things that aren't being heralded by the populace or by newspapers, but are really critical to the city's future and to the issues we're talking about today. So I'm really grateful to be here today, and with the esteemed panel we have. Just quickly introductions, and you have the full bios in your packet. We have Mayor Kasim Reed, who's the mayor of Atlanta, first elected in 2011. That year, Governing Magazine called him one of the best and brightest top local leaders in the nation. He was re-elected in 2013, and among many things that he had to grapple with when he was first elected mayor was a $48 million budget shortfall, which he then turned around to 4 years of consecutive balanced budgets in Atlanta. He served 11 years in the Georgia General Assembly, 2 terms in the Georgia House of Representatives, and 8 years in the state Senate. So a long history in public service in Atlanta and Georgia. Next, we have Mayor Gimenez, the mayor of Miami-Dade. It's actually the 4th largest metropolitan government in the U.S., serving 2.7 million people. Annual budget of $6 billion and 26,000 employees, is that? Yep. Give or take? Yep. You served prior to that for 7 years on the board of the County Commission for Miami-Dade. We're also the city manager of Miami, where again dealt with some major fiscal issues and oversaw a process where it moved the city from a junk bond status to investment grade. And prior to that, served many years in fire and rescue, including as the chief. On my right, we have the mayor for technical and environmental affairs, Morten Kabell for Copenhagen. Copenhagen is really a climate leader, as we've talked about where their bold pledge is happening. Copenhagen is pledged to be carbon neutral by 2025. And unlike many people who have made the pledge, companies or cities, there's actually a very detailed plan about how they get there based on the data. We'll talk about that fact. You've served over 20 years in the city council in Copenhagen. And are very focused also on international cooperation and building a network of cities. Then on my far right, we have Magda Kubzenska. Sorry, my Polish is not what it used to be. The director within the Directorate for General Mobility and Transport within the European Commission, responsible for implementing innovative and sustainability mobility policy. You joined the European Commission in 2006. working on clean transport and urban transport issues, then moved on to marine transport issues. So today we've really focused a lot on the energy supply. We left off the fact that transportation is a major issue when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, a major issue. We heard about a third of emissions, a major issue when it comes to cities. So looking forward to bringing that into the conversation now. And why cities are so important. And we talked about it a little bit. It came up in the last two panels about cities as needing to be part of the action, where you're seeing early innovation happening. Just to benchmark where we are with cities, 60% of the global population is in cities. About 70% of global GHG emissions are coming from cities. 75% of global energy use is in cities. And 85% of global GDP is in cities. So we can't solve any of the challenges that we're facing. We can't make movement on climate change if we don't talk about, engage, and empower cities as part of that solution. I was first in Copenhagen in 2009, leading up to the COP that was happening there, where we were planning our own mayor summit because mayors and cities were not invited to the proceedings that were happening under the UNFCCC. So we had our own summit in the plaza in front of City Hall, juxtaposing that with what happened in COP21 in Paris, where you had over 500 mayors coming together to talk about climate change, the largest ever convening of local leaders to talk about climate change. Mayor Reed, you were at that event and signed the Compact of Mayors. Now almost 500 mayors have signed on to that, saying they're going to take aggressive action on climate change. You're seeing a real change not only in cities being empowered, but being recognized for the role that they can play. So really excited and thrilled to be here to talk about cities, and I think it's appropriate that we can end hopefully on a positive note. Kapczynska. Thank you. Very impressive.
We'll practice it at the end of
yes.
the session, obviously, for everybody.
We can end on the positive note about the aggressive action that's happening in cities, not only going green, but cities that are being green and already green. So I'd like to start, Mayor Reed, with you. You know, as I said, you were in Paris.
Yes.
You've signed the Compact of Mayors. You're an early signer of that. You have a sustainability plan that set a goal. You're from a region in the southeast of the U.S. where it may not be seen as a natural that you take on a climate leadership role, where it may not be seen as a top priority. What led you to there, and what are the actions that you're taking in Atlanta?
What led me to it is science, and I can feel I can feel that the Earth is getting warmer, and the weather events that we're dealing with are becoming more severe, and mayors are really on the front lines. And so what I think is attractive about cities is if I need to make a significant policy decision in Atlanta, it requires my will and 8 votes. And if you contrast that to where we're sitting right now, just down the road, I don't think that you could have greater inspiration for why cities are important. You know, I tell young folks all of the time that, you know, if you don't want to spend the rest of your life trying to change the world, you need to be doing it in cities. And so what we did was to change our behavior in a rather radical way. We joined President Obama's initiative where we are trying to reduce energy use in the Better Buildings Challenge by 20% by the year 2020. We're more than halfway there. We have more than 100 million square feet of office holders in the city of Atlanta who raised their hand and said that they want to create a more energy efficient environment. We've reduced our water usage by more than 20%, even though that hurts our bottom line because we're a water provider. We've moved forward with the largest solar deployment in the history of the city of Atlanta, the largest electric vehicle deployment in the history of the city of Atlanta. And we have done all of these things with my office and 8 votes. And since cities represent 75% of U.S. GDP and the overwhelming majority of the population, I really think that's where the action is, which is why I think this panel is so appropriate.
And Mayor Gimenez, you know, if you think about cities on the front line of climate change, probably Florida and Miami-Dade is a poster child for that. The massive risks that you face currently from coastal storms. Climate change projections put a foot of sea level rise by 2020, maybe 3.5 feet by mid-century, tenfold increase of days over 95 degrees. You know, is this something that's on everyone's minds, and what are you doing to take action?
Well, First of all, there was an interesting thing. Why don't politicians, look, to the future? Most politicians maybe look towards the end of their term. I know that Mayor Reed and I, we have a different perspective. I look at my grandchildren, and see, that's what I'm there for. Okay, so they're going to be here a lot after I'm here. Okay, and so I got to make sure that Miami is the place that they want to live, work, and play long after I'm gone. Okay, because it's a fabulous place. Yes, we are on the forefront of sea level rise, and it's got to do with two things. The oceans are rising, but our bedrock is limestone, which is porous, and so we can't really build dikes or anything around to keep it out because it'll just come up from underneath. And so we're the first county, I think, in the United States that hired a resiliency officer. Everything that we do is with an eye towards the future. Will that the assets that we're building have to endure and have to be there for their projected lifetime? And we've signed a compact with the 4 counties in our area, 8 million people, where the mayors of the 4 counties are getting together, and we have goals that we want to achieve as an area. I was one of the climate summit leaders that went to LA last year. There was 8 from the United States and there was 8 from China. It was easy for me to sign the compact because we were already doing everything that they asked us to do. We're going to be reducing our CO2 emissions by 50% by the year 2050. But for us, really, it's not enough. And so we are, in terms of our energy, we are reducing our energy. We're going to we're going to change from diesel buses, and we're going to go mostly electric or battery. The technology is here. We've already tried it. We want to get away from the cars. There's a lot of cars in Miami-Dade, and we want to get our people out of cars and get them into mass transit. So we're building new mass transit lines. But everything is with an eye towards resiliency, and so we are at the ground zero. We are also ground zero for hurricanes. All right, and so when a hurricane comes around, not only do you have sea level rise, but then the hurricane itself will put another 15, 20 feet possibly, inland. So we have to make sure that our infrastructure is resilient to that we're resilient to pandemics, that we're resilient to cyber attacks, that we're resilient for everything, because we don't want to make the mistake of building something and then not foreseeing things that could happen to that infrastructure that then will make our children or our grandchildren have to rebuild it. All right, that's really what we're all about.
And Mayor, a lot of times climate change and climate action is framed around risk. I was reading the climate adaptation plan for Copenhagen on the flight up this morning, and I was really struck by how positive it was. And one of the quotes that was in there was actually said, climate change adaptation gives Copenhagen unique opportunity to develop the city in such a way that it continues to be one of the world's most livable cities. And a lot of it was framed around the opportunities that climate change presents. I was wondering if you could expand on how you arrived at that and what do you think that means for the city?
Well, for us, when we are talking about changing the city, and basically climate adaptation is about changing the city from top to bottom, then, well, we can either say we can go for just having one solution, or just talking about cloudbursts, for instance, and the heavy rainstorms that we are having in Copenhagen more and more. We can either talk about, okay, we can take care of the water, but who would actually get benefits out of that on a long-term basis? So for us, it's about livability. It's about making sure that the water coming down from the skies is actually being used for something good. So for us, the strategy is about creating a blue and green city, so that the water which will fall down, which will come down with the rains, actually can be used for making a greener city, turning the squares into green areas, turning streets into having small streams in the sites, and so on. So making sure that our citizens will actually have more benefits than just getting rid of the water. And actually, the positive thing is that it's also cheaper. I mean, we are talking about cloudbursts for the moment that, for instance, the one we had in 2011, it cost damages for $1 to $1.2 billion in 15 minutes of rain. That's a pretty heavy sum. But we can make sure that we can handle that amount of water for just around $3 to $3.5 billion over 20 years by digging up the whole city and putting in new sewers. That can be done. It would make it impossible to get around town. The mobility would be greatly impaired, but it could be done. But there would be no additional benefits to gain out of that. Or we could turn the city green and blue. Use the water on the surface, make sure that it benefits Copenhagen as a whole, makes it even more livable. And the point is that costs half the money than the sewer solution does. So choosing the green solution was not only the most livable solution, but it's also the cheapest solution. And going out to Copenhageners and asking them, do you want to hand us $1.5 or $3 billion? Well, it makes it quite easy, that choice. But it's all about livability. It's making a better city whilst you're at it.
And Magda, as you mentioned, we focused a lot on energy while we've been here today. I think the last panel touched on transportation, but only in the sense of what fuel they were using. Where do you see the opportunities for cities as they look at climate change and needing to meet their commitment, and also the growth that's going to happen? We're going to build, in the next few decades, 4 times the amount of infrastructure that currently exists in the world, and how that's built and where it's built is really going to determine whether we lock in a future that's high carbon or low carbon. Where do you see transportation as an opportunity within that?
Thank you. Before I answer, I would just like to pick up on one thing that Mayor Reid said. Ages ago, before I started to work for this big multinational organization known as European Commission, I had worked for a couple of years as a chief of staff for a couple of mayors of Warsaw. And Mayor, I have to totally agree with you. I can never understand why politicians go into national politics if they can do local politics. Although I think with 8 votes that you only need to convince, you really, you have one of the most interesting jobs that you can imagine, because not all mayors are in that comfortable situation. And I think in particular in Europe, there are sometimes, various layers of local, city, regional, national government that make it a bit more complicated. In terms of the opportunities, I think it's worth recalling that, of course, nowadays we talk about climate change, climate challenges, energy problems, energy independence, energy sources, but cities did not start to look into transport issues and to some extent also energy issues only now. Because one major driver for cities to look into how they are organized and what happens, again, in particular in the area of transportations, were the issues related to air quality and to health. And again, we are now overwhelmed by the talk about CO2 emissions, but I think we should not forget that the movement in cities to make them more livable, more clean, more green, started many years ago when the issue of linking transport emissions with health have been pointed to. But if you ask Adam, what is the opportunity, and I think to some extent why this climate and green economy topic came so much to the front. Well, first and foremost, because it can. Because we have such a huge technological opportunity that is available to any city, any decision maker, but also any company operating in a city to make it organized differently, to make it function differently. And I think one big lesson that we are learning is that it would be easier for me, because I deal with transport, to talk about transport only, but you can't look at any area of life in a city independently of every other area. The beauty of a city is that everything is connected to everything else. How you run your road, how you run your mass transit, how you organize and where you locate your hospitals, your schools, your shops, your entertainment centers, what you do with waste treatment, what you do with your energy supplies, it is all interconnected. But I think what is really a big change in those last couple of years is that thanks to technology, on the one hand, the policymakers have got tools that they didn't have before in terms of access to information, in terms of using data in a way that can help you to manage your city differently. But it is also a huge opportunity for companies, for private individuals, let's call them, to come in and supply a completely new set of services, new way of managing, be it energy supply, be it transport supply, be it any supply of any service that's relevant to the city. And again, this ability to do it is much more decentralized now than it used to be before.
So, Mayor, I was struck by our conversation prior to the panel when you were talking about the environment that you're sitting in now within Denmark. And, many people looked at New York City and said, of course, so much is happening with Plan YC and sustainability. It's New York. We can discount that, ignoring the fact that prior to 2007 and Mayor Bloomberg, there wasn't a sustainability plan and New York wasn't seen as a very green city. Was the efforts and the progress you've made in Copenhagen, is that a foregone conclusion? Or if not, what was the environment and what needed to happen to put you on this pathway?
It was definitely not foregone. When you looked at Copenhagen 30, 40 years ago, we were a car-oriented city. We had, I'll say, most of the city was modeled on a US city, being based on major roads, too many cars and all that. What actually happened was that Copenhageners thought that enough was enough. Copenhageners took to the streets in the 70s. At one point we had 150,000 people in the city hall square demanding to get their city back. They wanted to be able to send their kids off to school on their own on a bicycle. They wanted to be able to hang out on a square instead of having it used as a parking lot. And that slowly changed. City council slowly responded to it. But we see a lot of problems with that, a lot of challenges, I'll say. For instance, for the moment in Denmark, we have a national government whom I could be very envious on Colombia for. We had Andrea Guerrero this morning saying that there are no climate skeptics in Colombia. Well, I can say that apparently they are all in government in Denmark. Even our Minister of Climate is once, as he said, he misspoke himself when he actually said that he didn't believe in man-made climate change. Some would say he had the wrong job then. But so that is kind of like the challenges that we are facing. So we're doing it on our own in the city. And fortunately, with the good help of other cities and with the major support of Copenhageners, they actually want the change.
And Mayor, I come from a region where often the international collaboration and coordination can be a lot easier than working with the other government entities in your region. We have the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, many other entities that conflict is common in. You work in a very dense region with a number of cities. 7 of the cities in the area have actually signed on to the lawsuit supporting the EPA's Clean Power Plan. How are the governments there and the cities coming together? And you mentioned that you're working with 4 other counties. What brought them together and how has that been facilitated?
We have a little different kind of government there. The county is the overlying government, and then the cities take care of their police, fire, all those things. But I don't have a problem with the Port Authority. We run it, okay? I don't have a problem with the airport.
Spoken like a true mayor.
Yeah.
we run that too. And I don't have a problem with water and sewer because we run that also. Transportation, we run that. So I don't have the same problems that maybe a lot of other folks have in terms of interrelations. Our problems really deal more with our relations with the state, not so much as our relations inside Miami-Dade County and the cities inside Miami-Dade County. We're all pretty much in line. They have their things that they have to do, but in terms of the overall strategy for our power consumption, again, transportation is ours. Okay, and so. Those things that climate change really affect are mostly ours. Those cities do have, they're in the front line, but so are we because we're part of that. Okay, so the residents, the clients of all the cities are clients of Miami-Dade, and so we have a joint vision. We have a common vision of what we want to do for our citizens in Miami-Dade. It's much easier. Our issues are with the state. Our issues with the federal government, and you're right. I wouldn't want to be in the federal government. I don't want to come up here and have to deal with 400 and something folks, right, and 100 senators and 435 Congress folks. He needs 8 votes. I need 7. All right. So
you have the best job on the platform.
Well, I guess you have 15 on your council. I have 13 on mine, and so I need 1 less than he does. And what's interesting about our commission is this: There's 6 Republicans and 6 Democrats, and 1 independent. And I challenge you to tell me who you think, when you see one of our commission meetings, who the Republicans are and who the Democrats are. Once it gets to the local level, all that stuff goes away. All right, and we're also nonpartisan, so we're not elected as a Republican or a Democrat. I'm elected as Carlos Gimenez, no party. All right, but just so happens that that's the way it came out. And so the first sponsor of climate change legislation in my commission was actually a Republican. All right, and you wouldn't think that. Well, wait a minute, but we see the threat. And we're going to take action, and it's for our kids, and it's for our grandchildren. And again, in Dade County itself, because of the structure, we don't have that kind of infighting. Our infighting is more with the state and the federal government. We want more resources from the federal government. We want more resources from the state. In our state, the further north you get, the more south it goes. Okay. Okay. All right. So, you know.
Someone please tweet that out so I need that quote.
Yeah, and it's true. You know it's true. The more north you go, the more south it gets, okay?
Up becomes down and down becomes up.
Yeah, it really is because Miami-Dade is much more diverse, and you know, it's much less old South, okay? Whereas, like, you go to the northern part of the state is really, you know, old South. All right, and so
we call it Georgia.
They call it, yeah.
We call it South Georgia.
Right, okay, all right.
We call North Florida South Georgia.
Yeah, it's South Georgia, and so that's where they kind of look at us a little bit different. Even though we are the economic engine of the state, we have the largest economic generator of the state. And all, so we're all constantly fighting to get, you know, our fair share back. That's what we do. And so our relations, but inside we're pretty solid, you know, in terms of our relations.
Mayor Reed, you've been focused a lot, reading through your sustainability plan, around transit-oriented development, trying to change land use patterns in a way that discourages car use, where you have, I think it was about 43% of your emissions,
yes,
give or take, come from transportation. I don't believe you have the same relationship with the larger region, 18 counties that make up the metropolitan area. Cities can do so much on their own, and such a big believer in it. And I often quote Mayor LaGuardia, no Democratic or Republican way to pick up the garbage. And you know, you're there expected to do a job. Do you face the same kind of symbiotic relationship in the region, or how do cities grapple where there may be a disconnect between what the city agenda is and what the suburban agenda?
You work together where you can, and then you get a divorce where you can. I mean, we just passed the most significant increase in transportation funding for us in the last 50 years. So in an overwhelmingly Republican legislature with a Republican governor, and we just received an authorization to expand our system by $2.6 billion, which is the largest increase in MARTA. And our system is the 9th largest system in the United States, but receives almost no money from the state. And what I think, MARTA is our transit system. And so what I think is going to happen is, I think the business community is going to tip the scales in this regard. Because mayors of cities we're all in a jobs war. And so what you see happening in Atlanta right now is Atlanta is winning the jobs war. We've had more than 13 to 14 business relocations into the city proper. And back in the old days, when you heard about a business announcement that related to the city, it probably wasn't really in the city, it was kind of in the suburbs. Well, that's not happening anymore. The business locations, whether it's NCR that's moving 3,600 jobs with an average salary of $80,000 per job, or Kaiser that's moving 900 jobs with an average salary of $85,000, or WorldPay that moved their headquarters from the suburbs, 1,200 jobs right into the heart of the city, or the Coca-Cola company that moved 2,000 jobs from the suburb and built an IT campus right in downtown. I think that is probably going to be the biggest difference maker to regional cooperation, because what is happening is that businesses are picking up their entire workforces and moving them into the cities based upon what millennials want and being about the future. And I think that that will do more, as persuasive as I like to believe I am, than another politician saying, hey, you need to get on board with sustainability and be more thoughtful about developing your city. Almost every major business announcement in the metropolitan Atlanta region is near transit. And when we were pushing for the expansion of MODERATOR, our transit system, everybody said that bill was dead. In 4 days, we passed a bill in the Georgia legislature that's going to allow us to invest $2.6 billion. And I think it's because of the business community and the fact that we play the same role as Mayor Gimenez. I mean, metropolitan Atlanta's GDP is $310 billion. It's bigger than 28 states in the union. And in the southeast, and we don't count Miami-Dade because you got to truck 16 miles down the peninsula. But in our region, we have the biggest GDP in that region. So that's how we approach it. And the other thing I think is that I believe in just going out there and doing your job and making all of the good things that you do and all of your people aware to anybody that wants to join a coalition of the willing. The one thing that I focus on being a mayor is I know exactly how long I have to serve. And so I'm not one of these people that's going to spend a whole lot of time trying to persuade people that you need to care about sustainability and climate. If you can't feel that it's getting warmer and we've got to do something about it, you're probably not somebody that I want along anyway. But if you need help, I'll do everything I can for you. And I think that success is what drives other politicians. And when you have a panel like the one we're having today, and people see us going out and having success, and they want to see what Mayor Gimenez is doing. If you go to Miami, it's breathtaking in terms of what's going on. As you know from working from one of the best mayors in America, so much of this is about competition. But the great thing about being mayor, the best thing is, once I call Mayor Gimenez and he gives me a terrific idea and I implement it in the city of Atlanta using his data, getting advice from his staff, I've only got to give him credit one time. I just need for somebody to record, right, that Mayor Bloomberg gave me this advice. And the next 300 times I say, look what we did.
The Mayor Reid plan.
Exactly. You know how it works.
Oh, we're all pirates, believe me.
We always joke we stole our best ideas from other cities.
Yeah, we all do.
And that was one thing I was struck by. You've invested, and even your bio talks about focusing on international cooperation and working with other cities. Copenhagen has taken a lead role in a network within the C40, hosted a number of events there as well. The C40 Cities for Climate Leadership. At this point, I think it's up to about 87, 89 cities that are working together to address climate change. Why have you invested so much time in that network and in kind of learning and sharing with other cities?
Well, first of all, because we get a lot out of it. I mean, we learn a lot. We learn a lot of stuff from other cities that we can take to Copenhagen and implement. I mean, yeah, we are all pirates. We steal as much as we can from any other city, and that's cool. I mean, ideas and knowledge are meant to be shared. So, of course, being out there, being part of an international community of cities is also helping Copenhagen. Second of all, of course, because being part of the international cooperation between cities on, for instance, climate adaptation also helps businesses in Copenhagen. I mean, last year I signed a cooperation agreement with New York City on climate adaptation. I mean, yeah, going to New York is always great, but it was more about actually being able to, you can say, systematic technology export from Copenhagen to New York City, being able to see what they are doing with the technology, with the knowledge, with the ideas that we have had in Copenhagen, and then seeing how they scale it. And then, of course, taking that back again to Copenhagen and being able to do something about it. So, I mean, it's not for the sake of our blue eyes. It's simply because we can get a lot out of it as well. And I think all mayors around the world feel the same, that Yeah, it's great to have the international cooperation, but you don't do it unless you really take something back, which you can use in your own city.
And Magda, Mayor Reed mentioned that private companies are helping to pull cities along or push them into it. In the transportation sector, the previous panel we had someone from Google. Google has now driverless cars and Google Flow for traffic management. I think everyone here probably drives by Waze at some point. You're seeing Uber that's now introduced to cities and changing the way people interact with whether you consider taxis public or private transport. What do you see the role of the private sector in leading innovation and change within transportation?
I think first and foremost, let's not deceive ourselves. Public sector will never have a portion of money that the private sector has to invest in innovation. So first of all, the good ideas will always come from the private sector. We see it at the European level, where out of our framework program, or I think it's like for transportation, I think we are between European level and national programs and money spent on innovation transport, that's like 12 to 14% of the entire budget of companies in the EU that invest in innovation transport. I mean, that shows you where the real new ideas come from. But I think it's not so much a question where we see the role for the private companies, it's more a question where the public authorities should come in or can come in to create a framework where private companies have a role to come up with new ideas and share those new ideas also at the level of cities or with other companies. Because the other new word, which is a lot in the air those days or those years, is the word collaboration, where of course it is all about competition, I agree, but it is also a lot about collaboration, and it is also about creating a possibility where new ideas can be tested, where new ideas can be proven, and when new ideas can be shared then with other cities. For the European Commission, we started, I think, somewhere around 15, 16 years ago, a relatively then modest program where we put a little bit of money offered to a few cities so that they can develop their first mobility improving concepts on the grounds that after those ideas have been developed, any other city in Europe can use and test and can replicate the same ideas. And of course, it's great to be sitting next to the mayor of Copenhagen, but out of the 28 member states in the EU, not all cities are like Copenhagen. Vast majority of cities are not like Copenhagen. And it's not that we don't have 50% of people cycling in those cities, but for many other reasons, also for the reasons that there is a different history in the economic development of many member states in the EU. And a big challenge that we see at the European Commission level or the sort of European level is how to make sure that those cities that have so much to catch up, that they can do it faster, that they don't need to test things, but that they can already take what has been tested somewhere else. And the good thing nowadays is, of course, that we can. It's easier for cities to reach out also outside the EU, and that's why any global international cooperation of cities, such as the International Covenant of Mayors or the C40 or any other city gathering, where you can actually put together people who need to address, in a way, similar challenges as far as transport goes. And I know that Atlanta is built differently than Copenhagen, and both cities are built different than Rome. But ultimately, the objectives that have to be answered to are the same. You have to have a well-functioning transport system that will allow the city to flow, both for people and for goods. And it's only a question whether instruments that different cities can use are the same. It's a question of money that has to be spent, and it's a question of money that has to be put in it. And maybe just very last comment on the private companies. I think what we are also seeing now more than before is the interest of private businesses to come in with financial support as well, because we don't have enough money to just support either transportation or cities at large from public funding. So we need to find ways where private companies, private financing institutions will be interested in offering or in coming in as financial partners into projects that will de facto then bring them profit, because they will do it for profit. They will not do it just for good conscience.
The financing piece is key. People often say the two things you need for for good action is the political leadership and will, which I think this panel is demonstrating exists, but also then the funding to do something with it. And that's been raised by both of you, who not only came into jobs at one point with fiscal crises facing your cities. You both mentioned challenges at the state or regional level with funding, lack of federal funding. When you look at the economics of adaptation, there was a project I was reading about in Miami Beach, $350 million for stormwater protection, which protects about $27 billion worth of property. The economics seem to make sense, yet it's hard to find the money. Why is that, and what are there revenue streams that cities can monetize that aren't yet being tapped into?
Yeah. A lot of it is public-private partnerships, and so I think more and more cities are looking to public-private partnerships to solve a lot of their problems with the financing. But also, a public-private partnership may actually be a better way. They may actually operate it, maintain it better, and it'd be cheaper than having government do it. And so, for a long time, we in Miami-Dade, what we do is when we have a project, we will look at the different models of how to create that whatever it is that we're creating. We're creating a water plant, a new water plant. Is it better to do it the old-fashioned way, which you design it, then you put out a bid, et cetera, and then you operate it and maintain it, or can a triple P actually do that better for us? And so each project is different. Laying a pipe is laying a pipe. I mean, that's not a big deal. You don't need a public-private partnership to do that. You just got to make sure you have the right price. So yeah, we're always looking for ways to get the funding. We had an interesting problem in Miami is that we had a half cent that we said that we're going to. My predecessor said they were going to do all these things with a half cent for transportation, and they only got half of one project. It was 8 projects they were supposed to do. They got one half done. All right. It's very difficult now for me to go and say, hey, now I need money for transportation. Give me the money for transportation because I'm going to do all these things. So for us, you have to prove it first, and then you'll have the support. It all depends on the issue. People are willing to spend money when they know they're going to get a good product. All right. They're not willing to waste money, and for too long, government has wasted their money, and so we're very cognizant of that, and so we want to make sure that whatever we go to the well and basically say to the people of Miami-Dade, hey, we need you to step up to do that we actually do that, all right, and not do a bait and switch or not get that project done. Funding sources in terms of the state and the feds, it's a fierce competition. We'd like to get money for our system, expanding our system from the feds, but so does the Mayor Reed, so does every other mayor across the country, and there's only a set pot of money, and so that's competition for that. At the state level, you need to find out how you got that done. With your state legislature, all right, and because your state legislature seems to be a lot more transit-oriented than my state legislature, which seems to
No,
be
they're
more,
not.
No, no. If you got $2 billion out of your state legislature, they're a lot more transit-oriented than
They're giving us the right to tax ourselves to generate
okay.
2.6.
All right, well,
Which is still tough. I mean, we're going to a voter referendum, but where we were. I mean, it was a big decision to give us the right for our folks to build ourselves. No, I know folks in Tallahassee. My legislature looks a lot like Tallahassee.
Yeah, really? Okay. Well, at least you got the right to vote.
Yes.
Okay. And my legislature, when it says a tax, even if I say, look, if the people give us the right to ask the people, they're adverse to doing that. All right. And so, and because, we're going to raise taxes. No, you're not going to raise taxes. We're going to go to the people, and if we have to raise a tax or we want to do a tax increment financing to fund a rail line or a project, et cetera, allow us to do that. It's somewhat adverse. So as a mayor, as mayors, we have to keep looking for different ways to get things done. But as mayors, also, we have the willpower to get things done, and so I'm committed. We just recently signed, first time ever, MPO. There's like 20-something people in the county said we're gonna study and we're gonna get 6 new lines done. We don't have the money for it yet, but we're gonna get that done. And so it takes willpower, it takes some kind of vision, and then it takes, really a bully pulpit to say that's where we need to go, that's how we got to do it, and then get it done.
And is it a challenge to do that when you have a defined period of time and terms coming up, thinking about the long term?
I think the biggest setback in the U.S. around public-private partnerships was the Chicago Tollway and Sky deal regarding tolling and parking spaces in Chicago. I think that, first of all, Mayor Daley was such a revered figure among mayors. But objectively, that deal just, I think, traumatized other mayors. And so while you see 3Ps being well done, certainly in Europe all of the time, it is a part of the culture. Certainly in South America and in Canada, you still don't see it taken whole. And I want to do a 3P deal, but the reluctance is, I think it's less about time left in the calendar. Because if I saw the right deal that would really pan out, I could get it done. But I haven't seen many mayors post the Chicago Skyway deal do deals of that consequence in the U.S. And I've had some of the best folks in the U.K. come over to talk to me about executing them on them. But one of us is going to have to go forward. One of us, meaning a U.S. mayor, is going to have to be aggressive in the 3P space and then pull something off that ends up being what they were told in order for us to move in an area where I think my colleague is exactly right. We're going to have to be in the 3P space in the United States because of the way that the federal government is getting out of providing appropriation to states and cities. So this public-private partnership is going to have to be done. But I will tell you, moving that agenda after what happened in Chicago, I don't know any mayor that's looking at 3Ps that doesn't have a feeling about that toll deal.
I have to say, as a very proud New Yorker, and I think we have a lot of great things happening there, one of the most exciting urban projects in America is the Beltline. And looking at something that encapsulates a lot of what we talked about in terms of land use and transit-oriented development and vastly expanding park space, helping really rewrite the DNA of Atlanta and the metropolitan region. And one of the things that is incorporated into that, for those who don't know, is also affordable housing.
Yes.
And the issue of equity and sustainability, we touched on it a little bit this morning, but not in a big way. How does that play in? And you've seen a movement now within the presidential campaign and elsewhere about economic inequality. Does that come to play in the issues you're facing for climate change and sustainability?
I think that's the real aha moment for leaders right now. The aha moment for leaders is, both in the public sector and the private sector, is you really have to start building in and addressing affordability and these income equality issues in a thoughtful way right now, because you don't want to do it on your heels. Because there's something going on in the environment right now. The way that people protest, the aggressiveness of the protest, how quickly unpredictable protests can emerge that if they get out of control, can do an unimaginable level of damage to the reputation of the city. I mean, Mayor Rawlings Blake is a fine mayor and a good friend of mine, but the damage that occurred to Baltimore's national and global reputation after Freddie Gray's death is something that I think we all worry about every single day. That goes directly to affordability. You don't want to be in a position as a mayor where you're talking about affordability in housing and in other sectors on your heels, only after there's been a challenge. So with the Atlanta Beltline, we've invested $400 million in private sector funds. We've had $3 billion in private sector development that was generated off of our $400 million in public investment. And we are making a demand. In fact, yesterday, we passed a piece of legislation that any time in the city of Atlanta where you're using public money to leverage projects, we're making a demand on affordability in specific percentages as a result. And we're also developing a plan, and I've created a position in my cabinet of chief equity officer. So now, as opposed to just looking at affordability, every time we're making a decision, we have a cabinet level individual who's going to be thinking about it in terms of housing, transportation, sustainability, and resilience, a cross-sector approach, so that in the event that we ever had a real challenge around an issue, I'm not going to be making up an initiative to address these issues around income inequality, affordability, sustainability, and resilience.
And I didn't mean to divide up the panel in the European Union
you
versus the
have.
U.S., but do you see the same type of equity and social concerns coming in? You know, climate change is a huge issue in and of itself. As you were saying, urban systems can't be disconnected from each other. Can these policy issues be disconnected, or are there equity issues that are brought to bear in your experiences?
Well, there's no doubt that they play a huge role. I mean, we saw that at the biggest of our stormwater incidents in 2011. I mean, those that were not insured, they lost, some of them, all of their property. And I mean, that means also that making sure that the damage will not happen again actually helps. Of course, it helps the insurance companies, but it actually helps more the people who haven't had money enough to be insured and who lost in 2011, for instance, everything they had. So there, it's also a question about actually helping the ones that are in need. I mean, the same we see on transport. In Copenhagen, we see a very clear pattern. The more you earn, the more inclined you are to own a car and use it. Actually, I was just about to say, the more male you are, the same goes. Men are definitely more inclined to use cars than women are. So, I mean, enhancing the public transport, making sure that the city is easier to use for bicyclists, also has a question of making a more equal city. So that's also a question of equal opportunities, regardless of being a gender question or an economic question. And that is pretty important for me as well, of course, because that actually creates a city where everybody feels welcome, where everybody feels they have good opportunities, and that, again, helps economy. And when we are talking about financing, how to actually get to have money for all of this, I'll say the London School of Economics issued a report 2 years ago about Copenhagen as a green economy. I think you can say a lot about the London School of Economics, but they are not quite the long-haired, tree-hugging left-wingers like me.
Long hair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Figuratively, perhaps.
Okay, all right.
That was then. And I mean, their report very clearly showed that the reason why Copenhagen, throughout the financial crisis, was never in recession was the green transformation. If we hadn't transformed Copenhagen, if we didn't continue to transform Copenhagen, we would have been in just as a bad recession as the average Western city. And for us, that has been a major incentive to actually move on and to say we have to continue that transformation because it actually, well, pays off, as well as creating a more livable, a greener city for everyone. So for me, that is quite important. And then, of course, we are in the fortunate situation where being able to, for instance, the climate adaptation plan, we are able to do that through our utility companies who are not relying on private funding, but actually they are able to go out on the market and, well, on their long-term 30-year loans, something like 1 to 1.5%. So we have no need for a triple P, and don't see the need for it as well. Why put good taxpayer money into private companies if you don't have to? That is as well as a thought we have to take.
And I love the idea of fighting the false dichotomy or choice of, economic growth or environmental sustainability. In New York, we cut our emissions 19% in a 5-year period at the same time as we saw us leading the nation in job growth.
Let me put one figure out here. The number of inhabitants in Copenhagen has grown by 25% over the last 15 years. Our economy has grown by 30%, but our greenhouse emissions have decreased by 40%. It is possible.
I want to open up, we have about 15 minutes left, questions from the audience for the panel. We'll start in the middle right here with the microphone.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Gerald Gloria, and I'm with Sierra Club DC's local chapter with the Energy Committee. And my question is, DC is a compact committed city, as your cities that you represent, sirs. And I wanted to know, what benefits have you gotten from being a compact committed city? Because previous to my work with Sierra Club, I actually work on the compact of mayor study. So I had a chance to look at all your climate action plans. And one thing I always wanted to find out is, which are the dominant sectors in your cities? And what are the challenges you face in reducing emissions and adapting to climate change? Thank you.
We'll take 3 questions, then we'll come back. Yep, right down in the front, and then we'll go in the front row as well.
Hi, thank you very much for a great panel. Jennifer Lakey, WRI Ross Center for Sustainable Cities. I'm very curious, and I saw a number of you in Paris at the climate negotiations, and we, at that point, looked at the INDCs, the nationally determined contributions, and asked ourselves, what's the role of subnational actors, and how closely linked and aligned are the actions and the opportunities of the subnational sector to deliver against the goals in Paris? And I'm wondering now, here we are with the Paris Agreement signed, what are the prospects that you see for your cities to help contribute, and what do you need from national governments to help you make that happen?
Right up front.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Washington, my hometown. Marianne Douglas Ungaro and I have a group called the Afro-Americas Network for the Afro-Descendants, the slavery descendants of the Americas. Also a 3 Mile Island survivor. Last week at the UN, or a week before last, Dilma Rousseff said that without poverty reduction and a reduction of social inequity or inequality, we will not be able to fight climate change. And actually, I heard the comment, I've heard a lot of, and this is a great panel, by the way, I have to say. I've heard a lot of people, they use the term, not just you all, but people now seem to have a euphemism or a term of talking about economic inequality, but nobody talks about racial justice. I think about the Roma, having worked in the Balkans myself, Kosovo, Macedonia, Croatia, Bosnia, been to Poland. But the Roma in Western Europe and Afro-descendants and indigenous people and Latinos in the U.S. Matter of fact, you guys represent communities that look like the future of the United States. So how about that? Thank you. Gracias.
So we have 3 questions. What are the benefits you're seeing as being a part of the Compact of Mayors? What do you need from national governments, and how can you help them reach their goals that were signed in Paris? And issues of racial justice that are coming up in climate change and sustainability and governance issues in general. Anyone want to take a first stab at one of those?
I'll take what we need from federal governments. What we need from federal governments would be a clear plan on and information on what the city can do, and to make our plan highly flexible so that we can be aggressive, and then to really remove the restrictions. One of the biggest challenges as mayors right now is less and less financial resources come with federal relationships. And so I believe that less and less inflexibility should come with the less money. But the federal government has a treasure trove of amazing researchers and committed public servants. And so to the extent that the federal government could thoroughly and aggressively design the mission for cities and give us an aggressive template, we could then go home and work on executing as quickly as we could. Because I think that that's the greatest opportunity to move the needle while national governments continue to have the kind of bickering that we're seeing right now, and just the unbelievable level of denial in one of our major parties.
I want to talk about the benefits or being a compact city. I don't know, you've been involved in a lot of these efforts.
Well, I heard your question of the advantage of being a compact city.
How is the knowledge exchange?
Okay. Sorry, then I misunderstood. Well, obviously, the exchange of information, the exchange of knowledge goes, I'll say, on all levels, between administrations, between politicians. And for us, it's a huge part of actually getting to know what's going on in the other cities, what is taking place, which kind of ideas can we take back to Copenhagen and trying to implement. And what I hear from most colleagues is the same that you say, Mary, is get out of our way, so to speak. And I'll say the same many times of the national government in Denmark, that if they could just stop being a hindrance, then it would be a lot easier. If they would start adhering to European legislation, that would be great for us, because they don't. So in many ways, it's actually remove the restrictions to cities and make it easier for us to actually do what we know that the citizens are interested in getting through. That would make, for instance, the transport much greener in Copenhagen. That would make it a lot easier for us to actually do what we learned from what we learned from other cities actually work in Copenhagen. So that's one of the real big things for us. Get out of our way, please.
On the inequality?
Sure.
One thing before I go on there is that what you see here is the rise of the city-state, all right?
The return to the city-state.
It's a return of and the rise of the city-state, and that we're less focused on, we're just going to get it done, okay? Before we'd go, hey, help us, please, and now it's to the point of, look, we can't wait anymore, so we gotta go. If you get out of our way, it'd be great. All right, and then we're going to go. And so around the world, I see the same frustration with their federal governments, and the mayors are basically, and even some of their state governments, less so in the state, more so with the feds, and the mayors are saying, okay, we're just going to get it done. And that's basically what we've done in Miami. He says, well, we probably won't get funding for that, but we're going to get it done anyway, because we have to make our city, livable. In terms of the greatest challenge to climate change is inequality, is income inequality. It is emerging nations versus the already industrialized nations. It's a lot easier for us in the industrialized West to make changes in our habits, but it's pretty difficult when you're in an underdeveloped nation, when you're just starting, to say, well, I'm sorry, you can't burn that, okay? You can't. Your energy is gonna have to be much more expensive because they're just trying to survive, and so that is the biggest challenge. So what we have to do is acknowledge that and help the developing nations create the infrastructure that they need in order for them to make the changes in their lifestyle and in their survival. All right. So that they can make a significant change and reduction in what the greenhouse gases that they're putting out, and it's going to be difficult to do and difficult to convince people that don't have the luxuries that we do to make those lifestyle changes, and we got to focus on that because the majority of the people aren't like us. The majority of people living in this world are not the people in this room, all right, and they have a different reality than we do, and we have to acknowledge it, and we have to be sensitive to it.
A particular challenge in countries like India, where you don't have strong mayors who have the powers and ability to be the world's great pragmatists and take the actions that we've been doing. I think we have time for one more question, and then I want to make sure we have a chance for any closing remarks from the panel. I'd encourage if anyone has something transportation related. So want to make sure we're not leaving out anyone on the panel.
I'm fine. Oh. I'm enjoying myself, so don't worry about me.
So why don't we do these two, and then we'll give people a chance to respond. Dan?
Thanks, Adam. And I don't have a transportation related. I'm sorry. Dan Borges, formerly with the Army Corps of Engineers here, and also a colleague of Adam's at the Nature Conservancy. And I'm very honored, sir, to have, both of the mayors of the United States from Atlanta and Miami here, because I look at you as two sides of the coin for both demographic changes as well as climate change, water scarcity, Lake Lanier, all those issues, governance of how you use water, Miami also with the inundation and potential flooding of the city. It seems to me, based on the comments I'm hearing, is the real power in this country lies with those city-states that you represent. And maybe I'm just ignorant, but I'd really like to hear your thoughts on how you serve as the vanguard to help break the logjam up here on Capitol Hill. And maybe you need to get through some regressive state legislatures to make that happen. But I'd just like to hear your thoughts on how you can lead the way, or are leading the way.
Well, I mean, my thought is that mayors have to position ourselves to persuade whomever is president of the United States to begin to break the federal initiative of sending resources out based upon 50 states, and need to make mayors more influential in the way that we distribute resources. We spend the money as efficiently as states. We certainly spend it faster, and we're closer to the people. But we're in a federal model that's based upon block granting in states. And they have 2 influential U.S. senators that are keeping it that way. But I think that that's beginning to break a bit. I think if you look at President Obama right now, he has Secretary Anthony Fox over transportation. He has Julian Castro over HUD. I think you'd have to look back a ways to see mayors of major cities in that position. That said, they got those jobs late in the game. If I had my druthers, I would have mayors from the very beginning of 8 years in very influential positions to shift, to make this shift. Because that's really what we're stuck in. It's like in Georgia distributing resources based upon congressional district. Well, there's a reason that it's set up that way, but it doesn't make a lot of sense anymore, right? We don't want to distribute the resources based upon where the people are. We want to continue to stick to the formula we've had. I think it's up to us to lead that effort and that conversation based upon results that are primarily related to job creation.
We'll go to a quick question, and then maybe we can incorporate that into our closing statements.
Great, thanks. Great panel. Great to see doers in this, city. And I'm feeling, especially having spent 30 years in the government and now back in the private sector. So, along with doing it, there comes the responsibility to do it right. Right? So maybe just a few comments about how you make sure the policies you implement. I'm with Harris Corporation, it's Keith Curtis. We do climate measurement systems and greenhouse gas systems. So my question is, how do you know what you're doing really is doing it right? Do you feel that you have the right tools to know what you're doing is doing the right effect? And would you like to have more? Because we'd be happy to supply you with some.
So maybe we'll start on this side and work our way down. Closing thoughts, and how do you know what you're doing and supporting is making the right impact?
First of all, whenever I talk urban topics, I always get carried away with enthusiasm. But I do always have at the back of my head that it is indeed at the city level and at the local level that things are implemented. And the responsibility of the European Commission is to make sure that we create frameworks where this is possible and where it is also possible for the cities to do it in a way that best fits every individual city purpose. But I think this question of verifying policy making is extremely important, and I think what I hear a lot from cities in Europe is also the possibility of comparing in a bit more objective manner what it is that they are doing and whether the tools that they put in place and the outcomes that they want to achieve are fit for the purpose. We'll be putting very shortly quite a complex set of benchmark and indicators at the city's disposal that they can use and apply and check against any policies that they are doing. But I think, obviously, for me, it's an easy thing to say because I'm not the one who has the political responsibility and then who needs and wants to be elected on those achievements and on getting to those targets. But just my very final closing remark, I think it's extremely reassuring to hear that in spite of all the differences, there is the same level of enthusiasm and commitment among any mayor anywhere around the world, and the same level of positive approach in spite of all the difficulties that all the cities are facing.
Mayor?
Well, when you do it right, that's true, of course. And how do you know it? Well, first of all, what we're doing is based on data, on evidence, on going out there, assessing what is the reality, what do we have to do. So evidence, basically is what it's all about. And then realizing that you do make mistakes. I mean, and then be honest about it. Because any city will make mistakes. Any mayor will make mistakes, but it's trying to hide it. That then it becomes dangerous. So it's just get out there and be honest about it. And that actually helps. And sometimes your citizens actually can be quite surprised when you even go out there and admit a mistake before they even discovered it. So and that actually helps the credibility. And as for returning to the city-state, well, cities have something like, 8,000 years that we have had cities. Nations are those upcomers for a couple of hundred years. So perhaps it's just a good old return to what humanity is actually known for thousands of years as the core of society, the city. And that's not bad either.
Somebody needs to tweet that for me.
Decisions are we make decisions. There's a decision-making process. You have data, you have information, and then you with that data and information, you make the best decision that you think is possible and for the benefit of your citizens. But one thing that I'm known for is that I push the envelope. I'm always pushing the envelope. I'm always pushing it. I want to be the first. I want to be the best. I want Miami to be out front. If there's something that nobody else is doing it, and with the data, I know it'll work. We're going to push it, and that's what I'm constantly doing. And will I make mistakes? Yep, I'll make mistakes. Will I admit it? Never. Actually, I will. Okay, but only to my wife. Okay. And so, but I think that that's everybody has a different way of how do you know it's going to work. My thought process is not just do this and then one step will it work. You also have to figure out every decision you make has consequences, and what are those consequences, and there's a step to that, and is that final outcome, and you have to predict that. There's a predictive aspect to this. Is that what you really want? Because a lot of times people make a decision and they think, oh, that'll solve it. It actually makes something worse because they haven't gone through the progression of that and that. That'll happen, this, then that'll happen, then that'll happen, and that'll happen. Oh, that's not what I wanted to happen. Come back. And a lot of laws are like that. We have examples of that all over the place, okay, where a law that you thought was going to fix a problem actually made it worse because nobody went through that progression. That's the way we do things, in our administration. I have great people, really smart people, and we sit in a room and we say, okay, how are we going to fix this problem? But as the leader, I'm also the guy that wants to push the envelope. I'm the guy that wants to, I want to head in that direction, and I want to change the way Miami is, and I want to change the economy of Miami. And how do you do that? Well, these are the steps that we have to do that. It's not a science, there's an art involved in that. I'm not saying that I'm an artist, but it's something innate, okay?
Mayor Reed, the final word.
Thank you. I think that you should put as much intensity and focus into selecting talent as you do into the mission. And we're at a moment, and everybody needs to recognize it. We're at a moment where there is enormous talent coming in the form of the millennial generation. They have a genuine interest in this. And so all we really have to do is to be smart enough to take them in and embrace them and give them a fair shot and a fair shake. But I think it should be talent-driven. 6 years ago, I didn't know anything about social media. The person that does my social media used to do it for Cory Booker. Now I'm one of the top 10 mayors in America on social media. I went out and said, who is the best at this? And then I went to New York and I begged Dan Torres to come and work for me. But it was the same kind of decision that we put into sustainability. I did the same thing with Stephanie Stuckey-Benfield, who runs our sustainability effort. We are at a moment. There are tons of talented people who want to be in this space. All you have to do is to have the will to go out and find them. And then the last thing I would say is this. People care about direction. You can make a mistake, but people want to know, is it sincere, and are you really trying, and are you moving the needle in the right direction? And to the extent that you're doing that, I think everything else kind of works out.
Well, I want to thank our panelists and for the European Union for convening us. We have three of the most exceptional mayors with us today and some of the best urban thinkers, so thank you for making this very easy.
And I want to thank everyone, first and foremost, our panel here. Thank you for very interesting insights and we are watching out for the new city-states. Maybe you need some diplomats as well. Maybe it's for you we are going to work. And I want to thank also our audience, an incredibly qualified audience that we have had here today through the whole day. A lot of great questions. I was supposed to make, according to my notes, I was supposed to make some quotes of what has been said here today. And between the further north you go, the more south you get. And Lord Debon's, everybody wants to throw things away, and there is no such place as away. I think you compete well there. That doesn't sum up what we have all discussed today, but it just shows the great span and the many provocative and interesting thoughts we have had and heard today. And I think particularly when we got into those who are really doing the work, and among those I count you here, we have felt more and more optimism. I think we can do this. I think there's a lot of goodwill and talent out there, and people have really understood now that now it's just to roll up the sleeves and go for it. And I hope we have made our little contribution from the EU delegation in Washington. And we're looking forward to keep in touch with all of you because it's an important network. So thank you very much for today. Bye.